Hi all. So I'm Ryan, and I am a GIS analyst living in Raleigh, North Carolina. And this past week, I attended Esri's 2021 Virtual Developer Summit. This conference is one that always gives me a good jolt of inspiration, and this year's was no different than any of the past ones I've been to. Um, with this year's conference, I came out particularly excited about writing web apps using their ArcGIS JavaScript or ArcGIS API for JavaScript. Now, there are a lot of great mapping APIs out there, but this one is usually left at the top battling with Leaflet for that number one spot for me. You know, could day to day bounce around between one and two. One of the talks I went to about this API in particular was on ESM modules and using those in your app development. Well, I was really intrigued by this modular approach to importing code. I was also intimidated when I learned you really need to have some sort of build process, build system implemented to responsibly use ESM modules for a production web app. Now, I'm an intermittent web app developer, and I mostly carry out analysis using Python or desktop GIS or other tools. But I've known about build systems like Rollup and Webpack and Vite, Snowpack. I've known about those for a while, but I've kind of had trouble getting started with them. Now, some of this is because I've been put off by the prospect of spending hours trying to figure out why my build system's config has failed instead of just pulling the libraries down from a CDN and writing the code for my app. I've also found it a bit difficult to find resources about build systems that are aimed at beginners or like intermittent JavaScript developers like me. I sent out a flare on Twitter, and a lot of people sent me resources. Nothing really beginner focused, I would say, or at least not what I was imagining. I got enough links, videos, and blog posts to give it the old college try. I'll meet folks halfway. If I'm not going to get exactly what I want, maybe I can at least cobble something together and learn from the generosity of the community that at least took the time to share what they knew about. So we arrive now at the subject of this video. So simply what I'm going to do is walk through creating a very simple map application using the ArcGIS ArcGIS API for JavaScript using two approaches. So first, I'm going to build this map application, doing it the way that I've traditionally done it, which is to load in the API from CDN, toss in the script tag in your HTML file, and then write your code. Then I'll do the same app again using ESM modules and the vite build system. Vite is supposed to be one of the simpler, like lower barrier to entry build systems, and I got it to work. So I'll build the app two ways. This is something that I know I have wanted, is to see like how's this approach with build systems look different from the way I've been doing it. So I thought I would make that video. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, before we jump into making our app two times, I do want to just quickly go over the web map that we're going to be using inside these applications. So what I've got up here is a web map that I've created on ArcGIS Online. I've loaded in a layer Raleigh Parks from Raleigh's Open Data website, and this just shows the park boundaries. They've been styled based on the park type, just using the default styling that popped up with that. I did, if I look at the pop-up configuration, I did create an arcade expression to create a value for the pop-up that is a little bit more narrative text, but pulls information from the fields, and so that's what you see in the pop-up. And then I've got the light gray canvas base map as my base map down here. I could also set some bookmarks and things like that. But then I can save all this configuration as this web map, and then using the web map ID, pull this configuration into an ArcGIS API for JavaScript based web application, which is exactly what we're going to be doing. But I just wanted to quickly go over what's going on when we're pulling in that web app into our application. All right, so let's go ahead and start working on building this map application using the traditional, to me at least, approach to map-based app development using the ArcGIS API for JavaScript. The first thing I have set up here in this this folder I created, ArcGIS CDN app, is I've got 3 files that I'm going to use to do all the coding for my application. I've got index.html, which is where my markup is going to be, main.js, where the JavaScript code is going to go, and then style CSS, which is going to be the styling information. So I've got that all in this directory, and then I've opened this directory in my IDE of choice, which is VS Code. So I've got index.html open here, and I've got some basic markup set up in here just to get me started. I've got the reference to the style.css right here, and I've also got a reference to the main.js file there. And finally, I've got a div with an ID of app. So that's what we've got to start. A good thing to do would be to have sort of a server running that we can use to monitor the changes to our app as we write the code. I like to use the live server extension that is available for Visual Studio Code. Different IDEs may have different versions of this, or it might be called something different, but a lot of them do have like an integrated web server that you can use. If you don't have one of those, you know, Python has a module that will spin up a little server for you. You could use Node, or you could use a service like Glitch or CodePen even to just do it all in the browser. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and use this little button here to start up my server, and that's going to open up my index.html in my browser. And you can see hello world here is defined in the app div, and we got hello world there. Okay, so we need to do a bit more work to get our HTML file properly set up to use the JavaScript API. So how do we install the API? Esri has done a lot of work to put together really great documentation and developer resources, and they've got a whole web page on different ways that you can install their API. Now, of course, you do need to know kind of what you're doing on some of these, hence some of my issues with build systems and whatnot. Some of them I think assume that you have one, but you don't need one when you're using the AMD modules via ArcGIS CDN. So we're going to use this code snippet here to load in the required CSS style sheet and JavaScript code for ArcGIS API for JavaScript. So I'll just copy that. I'm going to go up here in the head of my index.html and go below my style.css and paste that code in there. I'll go ahead and save. We look at the live server rendering of the page, and nothing's changed because all we did was load in the library. Next, we'll start putting together our interface and then loading in the map and getting our app off the ground. So luckily, like I said, the developer experience for Esri's JavaScript library is really great because they have a lot of code samples, and they've got one here called Load a Basic Web Map. We open it up, that has basically all the code you'd need to do what we're doing right now. They've just got it in a single HTML file. The first thing I want to do is define the style that I want it to have for my map, so like how it's laid out and all that good stuff. And we just want a full page app of the map. So we'll go ahead and copy this CSS here, and I'll paste it into my style.css. The only thing I need to change is this view div reference. They set the ID on their view on the div for their app as view div. I've set it to app here, so I just need to change view div to app. Go ahead and save that, and that really shouldn't change anything now. But at this point, we're pretty much ready to pull in our web map and get our application running. I am going to delete hello world here so we can not have that. We don't need that anymore. Now we'll go into main.js, and we can kind of use the code here in this example as our guide for what to put into main.js. So with this approach, pulling down the JavaScript API from CDN, you have to use the require syntax to like say, hey, I want these specific modules for my application, and then there's a function that you use where your actual app logic goes. So anyway, we'll go ahead and start doing this. Require, and I know I could copy and paste this, but I think it's sometimes helpful just to see people actually write the code. So Esri views map view, so we're going to pull in this map view module, which is giving us access to the code for making a view in our application where the map will, or our application will sort of exist. And then we also need a way to get to our web map that we created on ArcGIS Online, and luckily there's a module for doing that. It's Esri/webmap, and if you're unclear on like Esri/views/map view versus Esri/webmap and like what are the paths to these modules, you can go into the documentation, and they do a good job of telling you what exactly you need to say in your code to get your require statement set up properly. All right, so once you've got that require statement, the first part of it set up where you're referencing your modules, then you have your function, and we need to then, I don't totally understand this part, but we need to reference the, I guess, the objects within the modules that we're going to be using. So I guess with map view, we're going to reference it as map view, and then from web map we can just, I guess, reference it as web map. I'm not sure if this is the right way to be talking about it. It's definitely not the right way to be talking about it, but basically map view needs to match up with map view here, web map needs to match up with web map there. And then we have our curly braces, and so there's our function body, and this is where the actual code for, or like logic for our application is going to end up. And so let's go ahead and do it. So the first thing we'll do is we'll get at the web map that we created in ArcGIS Online. So const web map equals new web map, and we're going to get this web map from a portal, and in this case the portal is my developer ArcGIS Online hosted instance, and we can access a portal item, and then we will get at our web map based on its web map ID, and so that is this parameter ID. We'll go back to my web map here, and that web map ID is in the string of the URL. So I'll go ahead and just copy that and paste it in here as a string. Make sure it's in those quotes. Okay, and if I go ahead and save that, okay, nothing happened. All we've done is load in an instance of the web map, but it hasn't been attached to our view div or anything like that. So we need to do that next. So return. And again, I'm just kind of following along with this example here on the left. So now we'll set up the view. Const view equals new map view. And we have some options or some parameters we need to set. So the first thing we need to do is reference the map that we're loading into this view. So map is the key, and the value we're going to load into that is the web map that we defined here, web map. The second thing we need to do is attach our view to a div and or a container. So container, and we're going to reference this div here in index.html by its ID. So container is app. And once I've done that, in theory, I have set up my web app. We'll see what happened when I save. All right. So with that, I've used, I've loaded the ArcGIS JavaScript API over a CDN, use a script tag to load the JavaScript API link tag for the CSS, set up some styling, and then use the require syntax and this function to pull in a web map that we defined on ArcGIS Online, and then load it into a view that is then displayed on my screen. And if I click, it has all the configuration I had from this this map that I made on ArcGIS Online. It's now available within this web app. Okay, so now let's look at how we can make that same application using ESM module imports and using vite as a build tool. So we'll have to start a little bit different way. Right now I'm in a folder called ArcGIS.js with build systems. This is just like a folder where projects can go. And I'm going to create a new project folder using vite's tooling to get a project made in this directory. So something that's pretty helpful is they have a getting started guide, and they tell you what to do. The prerequisite here, of course, is that you need to have Node and npm installed on your machine, but that works on Linux, which I'm on, Mac or Windows. So that hopefully won't be a barrier to using this. But what you do is just follow their instructions here on the left, npm init at vite js/app, and this will get us into eventually a set of prompts for creating our new project. So this is project name. We're going to call this ArcGIS vite app, and this is going to create a new directory within this folder I'm in, and it's going to add some boilerplate files to get us ready for working with vite, but also ESM modules. So we could set it up for some other frameworks, but we're just going to do vanilla JavaScript, and right away it's done. Also very helpful that it gives you like what to do next. I appreciate that it says change directory into the app, the directory of the app you just made. That's something that would not necessarily always be obvious to someone like me. So I really appreciate that little touch. I'm actually going to open this project, ArcGIS vite app, here it is, in VS Code, and we'll do the rest of the installation in there. So open with other app, select. Here I am in VS Code, and I'm actually going to open up a terminal, new terminal, and I'm in the project directory. So actually that CD into the project directory is actually handled by VS Code by opening it up here. But if you were continuing to use the terminal, you know, you would change into ArcGIS vite app. But nonetheless, I'm going to continue using the terminal in VS Code. Then what it says to do is run npm install, and what this is going to do, I believe, is install any dependencies that we have in our package.json. which I think is a very common pattern, or maybe just like the standard pattern with working with npm, is you have this package.json, and it's going to look for your dev dependencies or any other dependencies listed. So go npm install, and it will do its installation process. I think a node modules, yeah, folder gets created, and that's where actually all of the files for your dependencies are installed. So the package.json is not the installation, it's just the instructions of what to install when you run npm install, or that's at least part of it. Okay, and then I think it said to just like run what, npm, let's see, what did it say to do? Let's look in their docs right here. Oh yeah, npm run dev, and what I believe that means is going to run this script here, dev, and what that actually does is call the vite command. So do npm run dev. Okay, and that has set up a server, a development server, broadcasting, serving out at port 3000 from our local host. So let's look at that. We've got hello vite, so clearly that's coming from somewhere. Looks like the vite setup that we went through installed some files to help us get started. We got index.html, okay. And we've got a div with the ID of app. All right, that's kind of like what we had before in the previous version of the app we developed. We also have this script tag for main.js. We've got this main.js file as well. Looks like we've got some JavaScript that is injecting this HTML into the web page. It's importing style from style.css. Okay, cool. Let's get this back open. I think it's worth noting that in the script tag that's referencing our main.js, we have this type equals module, which I believe we need in order for like the module syntax to be, or like the import syntax to be understood. Like it knows that, hey, we're bringing in modular code. There's definitely more to that, but I think you just need that type equals module to work with modules. Yeah, I think we've got a vite build system set up, but it's not involving the ArcGIS JavaScript API. I'm going to kill this. Maybe I could keep it running and install other packages from another terminal, but I don't know. I think for now I'm just going to kill the server and work through some of the documentation that Esri has on ESM, and also some of the work that Renee Rubalcava put together for working with vite. I'm going to be bopping around to some of these resources. This is something from GitHub. Their JS API resources, ESM samples. This seems to be helpful. So what do we need to do? I guess we first need to install the ArcGIS core. So this is kind of similar to pulling from the CDN before. We're going to install all the modules, but into that node modules folder to make them available to us. So we'll do npm install at arcgis/core. So that will do its thing. And if we look in the package.json, there it is in our dependencies. There's also this little bit in here that says something about copying stuff. I'll get into that in a second, because this continues to be super confusing to me. Yeah, we'll get to that, but we do need to install something. We need to install ncp. So npm install ncp. I think this is just like a utility that copies stuff. Yeah. We need to update these scripts right here. So the dev, the build, I don't think we need to, no, we don't need to update serve. We need to utilize that ncp tool to do some work with the assets, the files in the assets directory of our ArcGIS core. So like this is where I believe all the CSS and any like images, themes associated with the ArcGIS API for JavaScript where those are located, and I don't know, with the build processes, it seems like they don't get moved to the right locations that vite is thinking they would go. I don't know. It's a little bit weird, and has been maybe the largest source of frustration for working with this approach for me is the errors that this step has thrown. But anyway, they've got some recommendations on what to do here in the documentation for working with ESM modules and ArcGIS API for JavaScript, but didn't quite work out exactly how they said it would for me. I had to make 2 copy scripts, one for production and one for development. So I'll do the development one first, copy dev. And I was able to just copy this line here. And that seemed fine, at least for working in development. But for production, I needed to slightly alter this script. Oops, prod, like that, paste it, and when you run a production build process through vite for this app, it's gonna create this dist folder, and that's where the build will go. And we need to tell it to copy the assets from ArcGIS core into dist/assets. Whereas when we're doing it in development mode, it's just going in the root directory of your project. So it just needs to put it into ./assets. That seems to matter. Okay, we're almost through this hairy bit. With these scripts, where do we run them? Well, with the dev, we want to run it when we run the dev script. So we can run, just add an npm run copy dev. So that'll run that script, and then it'll run vite. So start up the development server and do the development build. For build, it seemed to matter the order it went in. So vite build, that needed to run first, and then run copy prod. When I ran it the other way around, copy npm run copy prod, it ran, but then when the build step ran, the vite build, it just overwrote the dist assets directory that had been created through the copy prod process. I think that's what happened. All I know is it didn't work. But I think that that's all we need to do with configuration in our package.json. There's a little bit more configuration to do in our JavaScript, our main.js file. Index.js, I think maybe the only thing we need to really do here is change the app title. So we could change that to ArcGIS vite ESM app. Go ahead and save that. Our style, we'll just pull that off of the sample we used earlier. Yeah. And oops. And we just need to change that view div again to app, because that's the div here. All right, now we can get into main.js. We can delete everything except for the import of the style.css. We still want that. And then we want to pull in whatever CSS style we want to use. And the ArcGIS API comes with a lot of different variants of styles for the application you create. And one of them is a light style. So I'm just going to paste that in. I think that's kind of the one that's used in the example. Sometimes people prefer dark, and I think there's other colors you can use as well, but I'm going to use light in this case. Okay. The next thing we need to do is the configuration of the where the assets are expected to be. Like where is the API going to expect to find the asset? So there's a module we need to import from the JavaScript API, and it uses this import syntax. We're going to import Esri config from the ArcGIS/core/config module. And then using that Esri config object, we're going to, from that module, we're going to set the assets path. So where are the assets going to be found? They're going to be found in the assets./assets directory. And this seems to work both in development and production. So we'll go ahead and save that. At this point, we still don't really have anything with respect to a map, but we could run npm run dev to get a version of our map up and running, or our application, because there's no map yet. So let's see it reload. There shouldn't be anything. No, nothing there. That's okay. Next thing we want to do is start bringing in those modules that are going to help us create the app like we had before when pulling from a CDN. So we're just going to import those modules using the import syntax rather than the require syntax. So first we need to pull in web map so that we can get at our web map. From ArcGIS Online, so import web map from at ArcGIS core. And as you notice here, when we're using the ESM modules in this approach, you get some like IntelliSense, I think is what it's called. It's sort of like type ahead hints at what you might want, what is available to you as an option to type, which is really, really handy. We want web map. Oops. So there's that. And then we also need that map view module from at ArcGIS core views slash map view. Okay, so now we've got everything imported that we're going to use. The nice thing here is we can just go right into writing our code. We don't have to set up any functions or anything. I mean, you could, but you don't have to. Really, all you need to do is reference your web map and add that web map to the map view, just like we did before, but not within a function. So we const web map equals new web map. All this code should look pretty familiar from the previous example. We're going to get that portal item, but notice that we're getting those hints on what we could potentially type, what our options are for new things to add. If I hit Control Space in VS Code, it shows me a list of everything I could potentially do. We're going to do it by the web map ID, and I actually have that already snipped out. We'll just put it in like that. We'll go ahead and save, and again, that shouldn't do anything, but we are pulling in the web map, and it's ready to be attached to a view. So let's do that. We'll do const view equals new map view, and our map is going to be that web map. Great. And then our container, remember that's that div in index.html. We're going to add it there to that. So we just have to reference that by its ID, and we should be set. So I'm going to hit save and hope for the best. Looks like things are popping up. There we go. Now we've got our map put together using import statements in development mode with vite as our build tool. So that's excellent. Now comes the scary part. We need to do a production build of this if we wanted to deploy this somewhere. So I'm going to open up a new terminal, and I'm going to run the npm run build. I'm going to do that script, so it'll run vite build, and then it'll do that copy prod. Let's do that. npm run build. And this will take some time, so we'll let that go. All right, so now in theory, we have a production build of this application that would be able to be deployed to a server somewhere. Now is the moment of truth to find out if this actually worked. This has been a point of failure for me several times, so we'll just cross our fingers and hope for the best. The way we can see if our production build was successful is to run this serve script. So do npm run serve, and that'll give you a preview of your production build served on a different port. So it's served on port 5000. And it seems to have worked. No errors. Very good. Excellent, excellent. We like to see that. So that is how you can use ESM modules with the ArcGIS API for JavaScript and a build tool called Vite. There are several other build tools out there that you could use to do this: Webpack, Snowpack, Rollup, and I'm sure there are others that I don't know about and are way more confusing for me to use. But this is a way to do it with Vite, and I hope that showing this comparison in terms of the workflows is helpful for some of you out there that are a little bit flummoxed by this modern tooling approach. I know that Vite is a little bit simpler. There's not as much configuration you have to do out of the box, but as you can see, there was still some configuration to do. And I hope it was helpful to have been able to have seen that. I'm really appreciative of the work that Esri's team with the ArcGIS API for JavaScript has done to at least smooth the path to doing this process. It's still, I have to say, it's still required going off script from the various resources I found regarding this API and build systems. But it got me 90% of the way there, and was able to figure out the rest from there. So anyway, hope this was helpful, and thanks for your time. And if you have questions, comments, corrections, for which I'm sure there are plenty, feel free to leave those in the comments.